Well, our next and last session is going to come from one of our supported missionaries. Don and Kathy Mingo have been serving the Lord many years on the mission field, but now their ministry is to missionaries, a missionary to missionaries. And I just think that's a great idea, a needed ministry. If you're here struggling, one of the reasons they've come to the conference is to be around missionaries. And they love conferences like this because there's lots of missionaries. So if you're here and you're needing somebody to talk to, that's what they do. Don is also an author, has several books that he's written on missionaries, on being a missionary, on some of the struggles of being a missionary. And Don, he'll tell you like it is. He's not going to mix words, and especially to missionaries and pastors, because he's been on both sides of it. So we're going to give him the time and that he deserves, and sharing some of the traits of effective missionaries, and just from his heart today. So as he comes, will you give him a hand as he comes and speaks with us this morning?
Thank you, Brother Steve. Your friendship, that how God brought us together, has been a real gift. So let me see if I can sit here and you guys can see my head popping up. There you go. Which is not my strongest physical feature, my head. So, a little bit about us, just to get us going here. And if I can pull my PowerPoint out here so I can stay with, okay, good. Kathy and I grew up in homes that were not Christian. I was a nominal Catholic, raised in Minnesota, and Kathy is a Kansas girl. So much was the difficulties that we had growing up that we've allowed just a sliver of information to get out so that missionary women know they've got someone to come and talk to if the worst things that could happen to a little girl growing up happen. Need I say more? I was raised in a home, both my father and my mother were alcoholics, loved my mom. She was a wonderful mother, but she suffered from depression, which ran in the family. And when she hit the bottle, she became a different person. My mother was a bouncer in a bar while I was growing up. So, and I mean that, I'd walk in there and see her 86. Who knows what 86 means? Oh, boozer, hey? Okay, yeah. She'd toss them out. And Mom was rough, loving, but rough. And my dad decided he found another woman that had 6 kids instead of the wife that he was married to that had 6 kids, and he ran off with her. However, I led my dad to Christ when I was 23, and he soon dedicated his life to rescue mission work, preaching and serving street men the rest of his life. And the last words he said to me was, "Bud, thanks for telling me about Jesus." So people say, this pie in the sky religion, it makes a difference. We went to South Africa during the apartheid years. We started to work with the Zulus under the law that whites and blacks could not live together, go to school together, go to church together. So we were restricted to living in a white-only neighborhood, trying to reach out to a black community, maybe a little bit like the Jones experience, a little bit in that regard. So how do you reach a community you're not allowed to live with? And God blessed us. We figured different ways to do that without breaking the law. And then that all began to end when apartheid ended, and then a whole new war opened up for political turf for the new parties that came out. The black representative parties could, and a war started, and I left Kathy and the boys in town. They went to a South African Baptist church, and it was there that I've seen people shot, dismembered, burned to death, electrocuted, and you just can't, necklace. Google it, necklace, South Africa. You look at the pictures, which is hard enough to deal with in itself, to see all those things, to smell all those things, to hear all those things. But I was doing pretty well. I was handling it until I decided to play basketball with a bunch of teenagers. And I went up to block a shot and ended up on top of my head in an intensive care ward, and looks like you got a pretty solid concussion, and it turned out to be actually a traumatic brain injury. And from that point on, my family said, you became a person we didn't know anymore. So mood swings, anger just exploding. And so what do you do when you have that kind of problem? You change locations and change jobs because that makes everything better, right? Right? So I came and I pastored, and I was a good pastor. We did a good job. But I needed help. I wasn't getting better. The dreams that I were having were always dreams of someone killing me, shooting me, stabbing me, burning me, electrocuting me, and all those other kind of things. And so a pastor friend of mine heard about this one, and he talked to me. And he said, okay, well, we know exactly what's going on based on what you've told me, and we want you to see a trauma therapist. These are the ones we send our vets to when they come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Big mega church, thousands of people, and they paid for it. I was diagnosed with traumatic stress disorder, and we've worked even up to this day to manage that. So came back and pastored a church. 80% of those people, lovely people, content people, but content people are quiet people generally. It was the 20% ecclesiastical terrorists in the church that made my life miserable. The other thing, we went to a place called Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and that's where Judy Garland was born, the Wizard of Oz. Little did I know that Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, actually still lived in Grand Rapids and attended my church. Presented some issues. And so as I was crumbling emotionally and physically and mentally, and you can call it depression, whatever you want to call it, and I've written a book on that. It's the black one on the counter, on the table, pretty transparent about what transpired there. God answered a prayer that I thought God wasn't listening, and brought a group of people behind us and got us the help that we needed. So as I was improving, we were working on that. There's no Baptist Bible Fellowship up down there, yeah, don't you know, in northern Minnesota where all the people like this talk, yeah, you betcha. They don't know any of these things. But we supported over 200 missionaries, and they would come and talk to me, and I would listen to them just pour their hearts out. I remember one missionary saying to me, and he talked about a very egregious thing that happened to him, and his church didn't respond well, his sending church. And he said, so I'm done. I'm leaving the field, I'm leaving the church, and I'm leaving the faith. I said to Kathy, that cannot happen. Of course, our church gave $250,000 a year to missions, so all of a sudden I was one of the most gifted missionary speaker pastors in the whole world. Everybody wanted me to come and preach, at their missionary retreats. And so we were down in Honduras, and I was preaching. It's the first time I shared one of my stories, which I cannot even share now. It just tears me to pieces to do it again. And I looked out at these missionaries' eyes, and their souls swallowed me. I just got sucked right inside their souls. And Kathy and I flew back to Minnesota, drove back to Grand Rapids, drove into the driveway of our house, where our house is. Our church just built it for us on 8 acres of land in the Minnesota woods. I love northern Minnesota. I had a bunch of Mennonites in my church. Man, could those folks build. So they did all that labor for free. And I looked at Kathy, and she makes me irritated most of the time. Kind of the faith spectrum, she's sometimes ahead of me, And I said, you know what? She said, I think we're going to have to sell this house and figure out how to do something for missionaries. Very gently, we resigned, did it through a process. I didn't want to traumatize the church. I said, God has uniquely prepared Kathy and I through the pain and suffering we've been through to come along other missionaries that are going through pain and suffering and help them with that. We sold the house, split the money with our 3 sons, and let them buy houses. And we were living with our oldest son and his 5 kids at that time. Now it's 9. And I got a call from Dr. Cunner, our missions director at Baptist Bible Fellowship. He said, would you be willing to come down and talk to me? I've got an idea. Now, we hadn't talked for 8 years. And he didn't know we had sold our house. He didn't know we had resigned our church. We came down and he suggested, would you think about doing missionary to missionary care? I said, on 3 conditions. Number 1, what the missionary tells us stays with us. It doesn't go anywhere else. And I always tell a missionary, it stays with us unless you're hurting yourself, your spouse, your kids, or something like that. Then we've got to widen that circle. Number 2, you danced the one that brung you, so BBFI gets first choice, but any missionary of like faith, we will serve them. They can come to us. That's fine. Number 3, I don't want to raise support. And you know, where's Lewis? John sort of smiled with a smile and goes, well, you get 2 out of 3. You know. Raising support was good though, because we were out with the kids doing it again, and got to know them right on the front lines. And so we got going. That was 10 years ago. Lewis McClendon, his dear wife, I don't know, was their epiphany first, said, we need to pray. You need to find a place you can go to where the missionaries come to you instead of you going to the missionaries all the time. Well, little did I know that I would be diagnosed 5 years ago with facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy. It's a muscle wasting disease. The face, the throat, the neck, the arms, the shoulders, the chest, and the core primarily. So I have no biceps or triceps, and the reason I fidget around and stuff, I'm uncomfortable in some degree of pain most of the time. You put that all together, 2 things. Pain teaches you something if you allow it to. And if you see God through it, pain always has purpose. It's not just there to be miserable. And so we got going, we got to raising support, but the missionaries just were flooding in. We were meeting them all over, and about 2 years into it, we get a call from an Anglican couple. And the lady says, I heard about what you guys do from my best friend who's a member of Granbury Baptist Church, Granbury, Minnesota. Would you guys come? We want to talk to you. Long story short, they live on Lake Granbury in Texas. They bought the house next to them and remodeled it completely. There's 2 cottages with it, fully furnished, and they said, as long as you and Kathy do what you do, you can live here free on the lake. So we've got over 200 missionaries come and spend time with us. We only have one requirement if they come and spend time with us. You've got to sit down and do 2 meals with us. That's all. And we usually start with, how'd you meet each other? That usually, and then boom, we're off. And we've spoken to well over 1,000 missionaries now. And it's our greatest privilege. And the only thing we tend to do the rest of our lives is to be the friends of missionaries. We get to know the greatest people in the world and be their friends and encourage them, and likewise they encourage us. And we have found that God has uniquely prepared us to do what we do because some of the missionaries that come to us have been through. I mean, I think missionaries that are pastoring will know this. Most of our churches have no idea the pounding our missionaries are taking in the gospel trenches. They have no idea. And it's not the kind of thing you can stand up in front of a church and say, hey, guess what? Guess what happened to us? Number 1 thing with the missionary ladies, loneliness. Okay. The missionaries suffer high rates of depression. You can say it's because they're not close to the Lord, or it's a spiritual problem, and that's a whole nother discussion, but there's more to depression sometimes than just not being close to the Lord. In my family, it's epigenetics. It's been inherited from one generation to another, so forth and so on. Panic attacks. We always want to know, with a panic attack, tell me what's happening. What's happening before the panic attack? Missionaries that, what I do with my aging parents. Missionaries that have lost children. Missionaries that just need to talk. Have never been able to talk and tell their story. So what I've put together is just some thoughts, 7 qualities of highly resilient missionaries. There are more. I'm not going to cover everything, but there's just some things to throw out. And you're going to think that Lewis McClendon and Dave Jones and I, we wrote our message, our lessons together, but we have had no communication on this. The first one, we're going to talk about resilience. Okay, what does resilience mean? Resilience is the ability to recover, adapt, and grow stronger after facing hardship, stress, or pain. Missionaries that are just now raising support, you're going to need to learn how to deal with stress because it's going to be off the charts. It's abnormally normal. There are very few other professions or lifestyles that will have the stress that missionaries will have, particularly the first term. It's just outrageously out of this world. I remember a couple calling me one time. The wife called and said they'd only been on the field about 6 months. She said, my husband and I are fighting all the time. I said, well, of course you are. She said, no, you don't understand. We're yelling at each other. I said, yeah, I get it. Yeah. We even started swearing at each other. So I wouldn't support a missionary like that. You have no idea. And I said, well, of course you're swearing at each other. And they're both on the line. And I said, and do you understand what's causing that? No. I said, who else speaks English in the town that you're in? Nobody. So all that stress is going where? It's not that you don't love each other. It's just that we need to help you learn how to manage that stress. Okay? those are just some of the things we get to deal with and talk with missionaries about. It continues, an expanded definition is it's the mental, emotional, behavioral flexibility that allows a person to bounce back from adversity, and that requires a lot of times training, conditioning, and developing. Not by avoiding the pain or difficulty, because we all have stress, and there's things you cannot avoid in life, but by integrating the experience and continuing forward with renewed strength and perspective. And there's biblical premises for that right there. I mean, James, count it all joy, my brothers. You fall into divers temptations and trials. You know that trying of your faith worketh patience, brings maturity. You don't become mature in Christ unless you suffer adverse trials and struggles. Part of it. Paul said it this way in resilience. He said in 2 Timothy 4:7, I've fought a good fight. I often ask young missionaries very gently. Now I'm the medic, okay? Kathy can tend to be the drill sergeant. So when we're sitting with a couple, every now and then I reach my hand over and I just touch her leg and say, okay, let's just, because she knows right where it's at. Let's go right after her, kind of thing. And she's really nuthetic, if you know what I'm saying. So we're in a fight. And when you go out to a fight, when you go to the front line of the battlefield, folks, the battle lines, what happens to the soldiers? They get wounded. They get injured. And I ask young missionaries, has anybody told you you're going to get hurt? What do you mean? I think of Ole Cunnerup, who's given me permission to say this was shot in the head, still on the field. And I could go down the line. Most missionaries that have been on the field any length of time, if they're in third world, they all sick. They got dengue or malaria or, I used to tell my kids, do not go swimming in any of the farm ponds in South Africa because you get bilharzia. What's that? Well, you go in there and you decide, well, in this pool and I got to go to the bathroom. And you go to the bathroom and the little critter crawls right up inside you and you can't get rid of it. Makes your life miserable forever. Every missionary I know has been on the field, not even third world, but they're sick. And they live with that. They deal with that. I'm in a fight. I've finished my course, and that's really what we're after. I'm not saying today that missionary resiliency means you stay on the field your entire life. Okay? But what I am saying is you're not moving until God moves you. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Brother Steve, I got a letter. I got 2 phone calls when I came off the field. The first phone call was, how dare you? You didn't call us. You didn't consult with us. They supported me $50 a month, so I figured a prayer letter was $50 worth of consulting, kind of. It was really harsh on me, and I hung up with I want to kill a pastor kind of. The next day I got a call from another pastor, and I thought, okay, you're going to get it. He said, we just want to know whatever has happened, we support your decision. We're praying for you. And if you need any encouragement, you call us. And then I got a letter from the Pelfreys up in Ohio, if anybody knows those. And they said, listen, we don't know what brought about this decision, but we want to know we're fully behind you. Very, very, very helpful. So I'm not saying you don't ever come off the field, but what Lewis has shared and what Dave shared is many, many missionaries, high percentage, don't last past their first term. And even if first term is a little fuzzy today, we used to say that was 4 years. But I heard someone say, well, I was a missionary 5 years. Well, really, you were in deputation 2.5 years. You went to the field for a year. You came back. You raised a little more support. You went to the field for 6 months and you resigned. And there's some valid reasons for that, okay? I know one family, their child was born, had the Down syndrome child, very severe Downs. And really they came and talked to us about it. What do we do? So what are your options? And so I think I need to maybe come back to the States. Which one do you think is best for you to come back to the States? Okay, there's some valid, that's going to happen sometimes. But most often it's not valid, what I just explained. And let me tell you what it does, missionaries, it hurts us because I've got millennial pastors saying to me, we just aren't supporting missionaries anymore. It's a bad return on our investment. I know a missionary, and I'm not criticizing. That's not my purpose here. I'm not, because if I open the skeletons in my closet and let you look at them, then you'll have plenty to criticize me too. But they were big money put behind them, really big money, big part of everything. Went to the field 3 months later, they resigned. Now, I know that church, and I know the people in that church, and some of the people said to me, that's it, I'm not giving to missions anymore. When I stand in front of a church, this is what God's called us to do. Has he called us or has he not? So I didn't understand the call of God, or I lied about it. I mean, that's where the giver is. And it really, really does hurt our church. So just think about that. He says, neither do I count my life unto myself, that I might finish my course with joy. Hey? It's hard to finish your course with joy when you've got cancer, when you've lost a spouse, when you've lost a church on the field, hey guys? When you're Timothy, that you raised at your table with your sons, stabbed you in the back so deep that you don't think you're ever going to recover, and you don't. When he steals half your church and runs off, and then he puts it in another theological movement. You know, these are all things that I've heard. I finished my ministry with joy, which I have received of the Lord Jesus Christ, to testify that the gospel of the grace of God. So there's our identification. Our identification, missionaries, isn't in the word missionaries. It's our identification is who we are in Jesus Christ. And so that's really what I'm talking about, the resilience. Many, many missionaries, Kathy and I know, they come off the field, they just sort of disappear. They're never going to go to church again. You say, that's because they're terribly unspiritual. Well, no, maybe not. It's like a lot of our military, they come off the field, they just can't reintegrate. It's impossible for them to reintegrate back into the American lifestyle. They don't understand anymore. And when they walk in, they're more a stranger there than they were in the country that they lived in for so many years. And so we're looking at all these things when we talk about resilience. Do what God's called you to do, regardless of whether you are. And remember, when the Great Commission was given, we were the uttermost parts of the world. So someone comes back, God's called me to pastor a church, where, fine, as long as you know God's called you to do it, as long as you have no doubt. But like, was it Lewis said, yeah, we never really hear the truth why missionaries come off the field. I always say, be honest. Okay? Don't tell us it's because of your allergies. I'm not making that up, that you have to come off the field, it's a health issue. It may be, it may not. But just think of those people that have supported you, that have loved you, that have cared for you. They deserve to have an honest answer. And one missionary couple, and they did, they said, look, we're just so discouraged, we don't know what to do. We're powerless there. I'm sorry, you forgive us if we've hurt you and everything, but we're coming off the field. And you know what? That church has loved them. And they're serving there at the church, and they've been put on staff, and praise God. That's what we're looking for. You know, first quality of resilience in a missionary is deep-rooted faith. Folks, if you're an adventurer, A-plus personality like me, that'll work for only so long. Because you're going to find, if your sufficiency is in people, okay, people are people. They don't let you down. They just are who they are, and they don't rise to your expectation of what you want them to be for you. We've lost 2 grandchildren. Our one son and his wife, their child died. It was a horrible death in the home. We were down immediately. And I'm not going to go into the details about it because I can't. But their church was pretty non-responsive. And look, there's 2 sides to every story. Okay, so perspective generally is my version of reality, which it may not be total and complete. But my son was called in about 6 months into it and said, look, you know, point blank. And I asked the pastor, did you say that to my son? And yeah. And he said, look, she was a foster child that you adopted. It wasn't like she was your real daughter anyways. And with that, my son and daughter said, kiss the church goodbye. Haven't been back since. Haven't been back since. And I shared with my son, son, Christianity isn't about a building with the people in it. Christianity is about the Savior on the cross with the nail prints that paid the price, that rose again, that's there. By his stripes we're healed. If you look at Christ, you look at Jesus, then you're on the right track. But don't look at those people, and they've not been able to get past that, and the root of bitterness settled in, and we still love them. We have a great relationship. But there's only one thing that sustains me, and that is I almost died with COVID. It was very close. And that was to know, you know, God is my rock, my source of salvation. God is my refuge. And I have to be reminded of that occasionally, dear, when I'm having a grumpy day, don't I? Kathy can very nicely do it. Here's some scripture. Blessed is a man that trusts in the Lord, and whose hope is the Lord is. Blessed. Another scripture, that Christ may dwell in your hearts. How, folks? By faith. Sometimes that's all you have. Faith, Hebrews 11:6, 1 through 6. Things we can't see. We know they're there. I've had people say, how in the world can you believe in creation? I said, it's called faith. I can see it through the lens of faith. Well, I don't agree with that. I said, that's because you don't have faith. But you can't know for sure that God created. Yeah, I can. Because once you have the lens of faith on, then you can see it. They don't get it. He said that you be rooted and grounded in love. I think as independent Baptists, we miss that last word quite often. Compassion. Put myself in the other person's shoe. Hurting with them. Crying with them. Hugging them. Trying to bring them back in some kind of restorative relationship. And then, but without faith, it's impossible to please him. Now, this verse defines faith for us. I wrote a book. One of my books is The Faith Principle. When I was pastoring, I became convinced that a lot of my people's faith was in their faith. Is it really in Jesus? Because I'd say, well, tell me about it. And they talk about my decision, my commitment. They go on and on. Got concerned about that. Well, the definition is right here. Faith is one that comes to God. God's the focus. And they must believe that he is, are convinced that God's there, God's active. Amen. That I'm a part of that program, that I'm part of that process. And that he's a rewarder. The word literally means compensator in the Greek, of those that diligently seek him. If I diligently seek God, I'm after it, then God is going to compensate for me that. And I don't mean with a new house and a new car and a boat. But somehow God compensates us for that, and we're living proof of that. We could talk to you about it all day. I thank God every day. God, how in the world have you done what you've done for us? Because we couldn't network it on our best day. The money to live on a lake. I'm a Minnesota boy. I love water. Here I'm living on a lake. I couldn't do that, but God did. So a deep-rooted faith, and I would encourage you missionaries to examine that, because when you get out there, sometimes that's all you're going to be left with for a while. And if your faith isn't strong, what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about your ability to project faith. If you're not deeply seated, rooted in Christ and in God and his love, and there's not some kind of connection there, you're in trouble. My crisis phase came with Asaph. You know who Asaph is, right? I go behind the hill with my two dogs. I had my two labs, a chocolate lab and golden lab. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, crawl up behind the mountain and sit there early in the morning, watch the sun come up, saw that, but I'd pray. And I saw so many things, and I got like Asaph. Why? If you're so big and you're so great, why? Why did we bury our 15th child in our feeding center that died of AIDS, that didn't get it from being born and didn't get it from being injected? Do you know what I'm saying? Why, God? Why? I mean, if you're all that, a packet of chips, now, I'm not being blasphemous. I'm telling you what's in my heart as I'm talking to God. Why do you allow this to happen? Why does this stuff go on? When are you going to step in? When is the righteousness that you talk about in the script, when is that going to happen? And what does Ahab say in the sons of Korah? Why is your soul so disquieted within, Don? Hope thou in me. And Asaph asked the same question. He said, but if I'd have said that in front of God's people, I'd have heard them. So I didn't. When they were interviewing me for pastor, this big church, who's your hero in the Bible? I said, Asaph. I was shocked. Not a single one of those guys knew who he was. I thought, okay, we got a real problem here moving forward. I've been a why guy. I don't know how many funerals I preached where a Zulu family's child was brutally murdered. And I get up and I say, listen, here's what God says. Vengeance is mine. I will repay. Zulus are a warrior nation. That's good communication to their culture. God will make this right if you can just trust him with it. Those kind of things. Second thing is this. There's got to be some sense of a God calling in what you're doing. I don't care how you define it. When we listen to missionaries and stuff, I mean, it's like, well, I went on a trip with my church, and when I got back, I just couldn't shake it. It was just there with me all the time. I mean, I slept it, I drank it, I breathed it, I saw the people. That's her God calling. Me, got saved, went and saw Father Terry, our pastor, called him Father Terry for about 2 years. I said, do we have a Sunday night mass? Okay. They had a missions conference. I didn't know what that was. I never heard of a missionary. And I walked in, I can't remember, old time. Jones, you'd remember the name probably. I mean, way back Ethiopia when Haile Selassie was still around. Can't remember the guy's name. This was back in 1974. I walked into the African room. We had little passports, and you got them stamped as you went to each missionary's room. And I went back every single night. There was something about Africa that just grabbed me. Bus kid. Went up to the pastor, God's called me to the mission field. He looked at me like, really? Here we are. God called. One missionary, I started writing missionary letters, and I found out there's a particular place that the missionary said, well, we don't ever go in there. It's just too dangerous. And I said, I will. God called. I mean, everybody's call is different, but there's some sense that God has called me to do this. Because when it really gets stinky, nasty, and rough, and it will, and it does, and it never stops, that's what keeps you on the field. Okay, God. All right. Doesn't mean you don't have a crisis of faith. Doesn't mean you maybe don't behave in the manner you ought to behave. But it does mean, as it says here, the missionary calling is when a person's heart is captured by God's heart for the world. And they cannot help but go where the good news is needed most. A couple of things on the sense of calling is this. Number one, and I'm glad Dave mentioned this, or was it Lewis? Let's talk about this. Give up your expectations. Because they're not going to happen. If you've never been a missionary in the field and you're going, whatever you think and expect is going to happen, it's not going to happen, I guarantee you, okay? And let me push this a little bit. Your expectation of what the ministry is going to look like, where did you form that? Where did you develop that? Most likely, maybe a trip to the fields, but you developed that back within your own cultural backyard here in the United States, in your own church. And so you got whatever you got from growing up in Georgia or me, Minnesota, or wherever you were, and that's your expectation, okay? And so I'm going to use this illustration. I want our brothers and sisters, people of color, to understand this is what happened. I don't want to be offensive, but this happened with a missionary way back when we were missionaries. When he came to the field, he said, I don't know what's wrong with these blacks. Excuse me? These blacks? Who are you talking about? You know, they just won't do what I want them to do. Oh, really? What did you expect them to do? Da, 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 da. Oh, so you mean when you had the big send-off from your church back home and you got on the plane, you landed on the tarmac, and there wasn't a parade there waiting for you, nobody was saying welcome. In fact, you're really not wanted in the country anyways. We don't need you. You're an American Christian missionary. Nobody needs that. Why don't you leave and turn around? And you came in and you looked at the people and you said, this is what you will do because this is what I expect so that I can fulfill my vision of what the ministry should be. See, well, I expect the national people to do that. By the way, national is a very pejorative word. They're the citizens. We're the foreigners. Okay. Now, folks, I was guilty of that in the beginning. Not that blatantly, but it's there. And you know what that is? That's violating one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt have no other idols before me. My expectation is paramount, the penultimate experience, and it better fit in that way. And that's not going to happen. How many missionaries, dear, we talked to come back after 2 years on the field? It's just not what I expected. I said, what did you expect? I don't know, just not like that. Just not like that. We have a saying in Zulu. It goes, Umuhlwa alabanjwa gekanda Isabella. Okay? And what it means is this: the termite that was caught by the head is still emerging. Let's take that one home and be blessed. Africans are very metaphorical, especially the older ones. What it means is, now, we have these termite mounds in South Africa. I don't know if they had in Tanzania, but they're like 8 or 10 and 12 foot tall. So when that termite pokes his little head out and you're going to make a grab for that, you're not going to get him. And the whole thing is, you better plan ahead before you try something. You better not jump before you leap. And American missions, I'm talking about our kind of missions, we've been guilty of that for generations. We often lead with too much money too quickly. We don't understand the people we're ministering to because we're just doing our thing. I remember one time I was asked, we were just there a year, I was asked, what do I think about dating? So I was trying to talk to this through transfer about dating, and a whole village pretty much ostracized me. Because to dating to them was going down to the motel and shacking up for the night. It's like, Don, why don't you just be quiet, play with these people, learn these people, get to know these people, get to know the names of their children. When they're dancing, go to their dances, cultural dances. Go to their funerals, go to the weddings, go to their birthday parties. Go and ask to spend a month with them in the hut and stay with them and live with them. And say, okay, look, wait a minute. Don't be bringing me hot water every morning. How do you do it? Well, we go out to the well and pump our own water. Okay, then we're going to go out to the well and pump our own water. And I never was able, neither was Kathy, which I was quite disappointed, but she was never able to master carrying a 10-gallon thing of water on her head. Really let us down in that regard with the other women. But sometimes they'd walk by with this huge pail bucket of water, and they'd have the little ladle on the top floating. They'd walk by like this, and not a drop would spill, you know. To spend time like your expectations. Same with your missionary team. Forget about it. Here's what the psalmist said in Psalm 6:2-5. My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from him. So let's go from expectation, which is the demand. It must be like this or else, to the word expectancy. Because if you look at the Hebrew a little bit of the verse I just read, that really is the word expectancy. Wow, you know what, dear? We're going to learn a new language. We're going to meet new people. We're going to see God do some amazing things when we go to that field. We've got experiences that we could never even dream of. You know, our boys are going to learn how to speak 3 languages. One of them to swear in all 3. Son, let's have a conversation about that. Okay. I'm going to learn how to proclaim. I'm going to learn to talk about Jesus, the true faith, the true Word of God. That's an expectancy, and that's good. With anticipation. And then there's also an expectancy. We're going to have problems. We're going to have trials. We're going to have hurt. We're going to have pain. We're going to have forces come up against. Expectancy. Paul said it this way, now unto him that is able to do exceedingly above all that we ask or think according to the power that worketh in us, right? My expectancy, if my expectancy is in God, very good, because the things that have happened in our life, I couldn't have dreamed those for a moment. You might do 5-year planning, good for you, but I don't. Because God pretty much rearranges our calendar. These days, not to be heroish, I don't know that I even got 5 years left, so we stay away from that. And then the third thing about some sense within the God calling is this: serving cultural humility. My way isn't better, it's just different. The American way is not better, folks. It's just different. When I go to the field, I remember we had a builder come over. From say, they weren't going to build. You had to have all kinds of credentials in South Africa to do any building. But they came over, and he couldn't get over that. Why do they pour the foundation, put up the concrete block walls, pour the solid concrete floor, and after it's all done, they start knocking holes in the floor and the wall to put the plumbing in? I said, okay, now I'm going to give you 3 words. I'm going to answer every question you've got. What's that? This is Africa. Or we'd say Africa. The groups would come over to visit. The kids say, why? I said, this is Africa. Because that's the way they do it. Paul said this, and I think if we fail in missions as independent Baptists, this is one of our weaknesses. To the weak I became weak, that I might gain the weak. I made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. The sermon of Mars Hill, Paul didn't come and strut around his credentials unless he needed to. And who did he strut those credentials to? The Jews that needed to hear that. Okay, you want to talk about who's a big shot here? Let me tell you about when we went to Mars Hill in Athens, he didn't say, you folks are all going to hell because you worship all those gods. He said, hey, can I talk to you about the unknown God? Remember, I was in India, traveled over there quite a bit on a business visa. I teach computer sciences and then at night teach in the Bible Institute. And it was a festival of Ganesh. And I said, what's that all about? The neighbors, what's that all about? No, we know you won't want to know. Why? Well, because we were told we're going to go to hell because we worship Ganesh, the elephant guy, the god of fortune. And they've got their own temple. I said, I want to know. So, take me to the temple of Ganesh. I received some severe criticism from my American counterparts. So I have to admit to you, sometimes I enjoy just setting them off. But anyways, that's another story. So we went. Tell me all about it. And they told me all about it, so over and so on. And the day before we left, we were there 3 weeks. The day before we left, some of those neighbors came up and said, well, why don't you tell us? No, these were really rural people, folks. I mean, they're not in the know about American Christianity. So tell us about your God. Okay. I could have told them, look, at the end of your festival, it's a paper mache kind of thing. You're going to throw it in the river, which they do. It's going to dissolve. It's go down in the river with all the outhouses and all the other feces tributaries, which it does. And you're worshiping that? I worship the living God. How far do you think that gets you, folks? It doesn't. Respect is earned and respect must be given. Number 3, real quick. Some responsibility for their own self-care. You're going to have to, like Dave was sharing, missionaries have marriage problems. Actually, what happens is you go to the field and the chinks in your marital armor start showing up. They were always there, you just didn't know it. And you got to deal with it, because you know what, if you don't deal with it, then, now we've spoken to over 1,000 missionaries, so it's not like this is 20% anything, but you get the marriage where the guy runs off on the wife, leaves her right there stranded in the field. You get the marriage where the wife runs off on the husband, which has happened. These problems are going to be there. It's your response for your own self-care. One of the big things with missionaries, get a physical, crying out loud. Get a physical and know what's going on in your body. Sometimes we have missionaries sit with us and they tell us what they're going through. I say, when's the last time you've had a physical? When's the last time? I don't know. But I'm like this and that. I'm always, and everything. Oh, sure, he went in and his blood pressure was regularly 180 over 140. That's going to do it. Or a lady that finds out she's got a problem with the pituitary gland. Or she's got what does our daughter-in-law have? Jessica. Hashimoto's. That was one, Hashimoto's. Get a physical. Look at your mental state. Look at, see a therapist. Okay, I don't want to start a fight with anybody, but I see a Christian therapist, loves God, loves the Word, but has skill sets that helps me in my area that I need help. Find a biblical counselor who understands a little bit what you're going through. Find another missionary, but you've got to take care of yourself. And we get so busy and we say, I'd rather burn out than rust out, I've heard. I said, well, what's the difference? Either way, you're out. What's the difference? And Jesus, our example, just come up real quick and you just take a look at it. Jesus made time for himself all the time. And we don't do that. Number 4, a solid relationship with the sending church. We've talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to go into detail on this. And when they were come and gathered the church together, here's what they said. They rehearsed all that God had done with them. Everything. They went back to their home, their sending church, and said, this is everything that's happening in our lives and in our ministries, with our church, whatever. Well, we don't do that very well. And a lot of times it's not the missionary's fault. Like one missionary said to me, well, my sending church was 5 pastors ago. That's just where life is for them. But you that are going out for the first time, you really want to solidify that relationship. How about ask the pastor every now and then, hey, how can I pray for you? Here's something, missionary, you bunch of tightwads. Take that pastor and his wife out for dinner and insist on paying for it. I used to say to pastor, I'm going to arm wrestle you for it. I can't do that anymore because we both know the answer to that. But we've paid for many pastors' dinners. Do something for your pastor. Let them know you love them. Let them know you appreciate it. I know one couple, they babysit their pastor's kids so they could go on a week vacation because they had one, missionary couple. There's just all kinds of things that you can do there. And how he had opened the door of faith on the Gentiles. What's going on? Number 5, quickly. Healthy mission agency connection. Now, a missions agency is like a marriage. You get the in-laws with the deal. It's not perfect. I've had missionaries that go on and on about their missions agency. I said, look, okay, let's talk about Baptist Bible Fellowship. If I could redo the missions program of Baptist Bible Fellowship to meet every single need that Don Mingo wants met and every want or desire, I'd redesign it. But it's there for 600 people. You can't have everything you want. Occasionally we go into the office and the staff there are brilliant. Most of them are women, not all of them, but they're brilliant. And I'll say this often. I said, I just want to ask you, thank you, and please be forgiving for the missionary that might have really talked roughshod over you and just given you a hard time. It happens. Not all the time, but it happens. We've bought pizza for our missions office staff at time. They'd say, okay, what's he want? Don't want anything. If you can, develop a good relationship with your sending agency. Missionaries are coming to say, I think I need to change agencies. They'll give me whatever reason. Obviously, if it's a doctrinal issue. But usually it's a methodology. I say, okay, so here's 2 questions for you. What will you gain and what will you lose? If you leave that agency, what are you going to lose? And then what are you going to gain? Because no agency is perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect match. Financial statements. I told Dr. Cunnerup, if Kathy goes before me, that's the last financial statement you'll ever receive. Because they're intricate. At least they are for me. I'm not a real math kind of brain guy. And I've got the examples there. Number 6, missionaries caring for missionaries. Real quickly there, if you'll bring those up. There's some examples. Some of the exciting stuff we're seeing, and that's how I met Steve originally through some way, is they had, what was it called, your thing that you did for missionaries? Salt. Missionaries that are taking care of missionaries, that are serving missionaries, that are serving one another. That's happening in some of the best stuff. And one of the things that we did, how am I going to grab that today? My arm isn't working.
No, I'll hold it for you.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Vanna White, let's get rid of it. If you're just starting out on deputation, you've been to the field, you get one of these, you can have one free. Not one for all 5 of your children, just one for you, okay? You want to be a missionary, essential considerations, required reading by 3 mission agencies now for their new missionaries. Talking about all kinds of things. One is probably why the team you're going to go on fails. Use the DISC profile. Take this little test of questions. Everybody's put in a quadrant. High D, A+ personality, they're in control. High I, life is a party, let's talk and have tea. High S, hey, I'm working, I'm just in the furrow, I'm doing the job. And then high C is compliant. And the way these personalities work, high D comes in to do a talk in a class and he doesn't have a pencil. He just walks up and takes it from someone right out of their hand and starts writing. That's a high D. But just plow ahead. A high I walks up and smoozes them for a half an hour and tells them how great they're and has a conversation. Hey, can I borrow your pen? Okay. A high S comes and gets out and they've got this pencil this big now that they're writing with. Steadfast. And the high C comes in and he's got a case of pencils. Now, if any one of those quadrants of personalities are overloaded on your team, it's not going to work. And most teams are formed by high D personnel, high A plus personalities. Plow forward, move forward, I'm a leader. And here's the thing, if you got a team of 10 people and you have 6 high D guys, high A plus personnel, high leaders, that's not going to work. If you have a bunch of I's, hey, you're not going to get much done, but life will be a party. I tend to be high I. Let's just have tea and talk. Well, we've got to go through the structure. I don't want to see structure. I don't want to see paper. High S because I'm way too busy. I got to get out there. I've got to furrow. I got to plow, finish plowing. I can't. And high C's counting numbers. He's bean counter. I had an executive pastor who was a high C. I made him a high C. He was something else. I said, what I'm going to do is dream, and you're going to tell me why it can't be done, and I'm going to tell you to do it anyways. So get that one if you start. Another one I've written, the Cross-Cultural Work with Spiritual Survival Guide, 14 tips to help you thrive in your ministry. That's been received very well by missionaries who've been on the field for a while. If you'd like that one, take it, missionaries. You can have it free. Behind the Missionary Smile. I had a single missionary say to me one time about 5 years ago, you should write a book called Behind the Missionary Smile. I said, talk to me about it. Yeah, you know, when you get up and tell the church how great things are going, how they need to increase your support and stuff, then you get in the car afterward and go, they only knew what was going on behind my smile. This book I interviewed over 50 missionaries to write. This book I interviewed over 50 MKs to write because I got a whole chapter in there about the pain your MKs are caused by your calling. This is a Christian's mental health guide for missionaries, pastors, and other Christians too, and partly from my journey. And I will tell you now, it's challenging. Remember, if you don't like the broccoli, don't eat it. Eat the steak, okay? But I deliberately challenge us some issues we need. I try to destigmatize the mental health thing from our churches. It's just, you know. So any one of those you can have free of charge. If you're a missionary pastor, you have the church credit card, so you pay. Okay? And then the last one, real quick. A Calvary perspective towards suffering. Look at Paul's suffering. I'm standing next to Paul. Well, you know, Lord, the reason I came off the field is I got discouraged. The reason I quit the church, I got discouraged. The reason I quit the faith, I got discouraged. Here's Paul, 39 stripes, 3 times beaten a rod, stoned, shipwrecked, perils, weariness, pain, caring for the churches. Paul's right up there. Next slide, please. I encourage people, imagine you're on the cross with Jesus and you're looking through his eyes. And you're going through the pain that Jesus went through. And what is Jesus looking at? What's one of the last things he says? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do. You know? And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, we suffer with him. Okay? That helps me a lot. I don't suffer by myself. And that we may also be glorified together. For I reckon the sufferings of this present time, they're not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be received in us. My brother had this disease as well, my youngest brother. He was early onset. It started right when he was a teenager. He died 2 years ago. About 3 weeks before he died, he called me. Well, his wife dialed the number and held the phone to his ear. He couldn't move his arms by then anymore. And he said, Don, you're not doing well with this, are you? And I said, no. Well, let me tell you something. You're only going to get through it one way. What's that? Every morning you wake up, gratitude surrounds you. It's on I call it the gratitude tree, he said. It's up to you to pick the fruit and carry it with you, what you're going to be grateful for. Or you can be bitter, mean, hateful, ugly, unhappy, painful. You can be all those things. And my last slide, sort of how I look at pains, trials, and suffering tests what we claim to believe. Oh, you really believe that? Oh, yeah? Well, we'd say northern Minnesota. Oh, yeah? Really? But somewhere in the middle of it, faith matures and we start to change. We like Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to them that love God and called according to his purpose. We don't finish, though, at verse 30, to be made more like in the image of his Son. That's why it works out for good, because I become more like Jesus. That's the direct object of that. Not by escaping the hard things, but by walking through them. And in the walking, we begin to reflect more of the Son of God and less of ourselves. And my friends, pain is a great instructor in that area, whatever you're going through. Just 7 qualities, folks. There's many, many more, but the 7 that we've seen a lot of lately. And we hope that's a blessing to you, brother. I know I went a little bit over, but I told Lewis, forget about the communication workshop. I'm not going to pay attention to time. After I did all that harping up here, missionaries, don't overuse your time. What a hypocrite.